Hello, my pack, and welcome back. Before we jump into tonight's story, make sure you've hit that subscribe button and turned on your notifications. You won't want to miss a single chapter of this. Now, get comfortable, and let's begin. The tapestries in the throne room seemed to absorb all sound, creating a heavy, expectant silence. From the high dais of the silver throne, I watched my most trusted advisor, Lord Atticus, approach. His robes of state were immaculate, his steps measured, but for the first time in the decades I had known him, a flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. The air, usually filled with the scent of polished marble and beeswax, carried a tension I couldn't place. It felt like the unnerving calm before a lightning strike. Chapter 1. The Silver-Tongued Snake. The reports are definitive, my queen, Atticus said, his voice a smooth balm of reassurance that had calmed my fears since I was a child. A rogue pack is testing our northern border. A minor display of force should be enough to send them scurrying back to their shadowed lands. My name is Anya, Queen of Elindrael. My kingdom is one of sunlight and silver spires, built by matriarchs whose magic flows in my veins. That magic was now whispering a warning my mind refused to heed. The entire royal guard seems excessive for a minor skirmish, Lord Atticus. He offered a thin, placating smile. A show of strength, nothing more. It discourages future incursions. You must remain here, safe within the citadel. The heart of the kingdom must be protected. He placed a hand over his heart in a gesture of fealty that now seems like a mockery. I gave the order. The very guards meant to protect me were sent marching toward a phantom threat, leaving my throne room, the very heart of my power, dangerously exposed. I trusted him. He was the man who'd taught me politics, who'd stood by me after my mother's passing. He was a second father. He was a liar. For a long moment after the guards departed, the silence was absolute. Then, a distant scream echoed from the city below, followed by another. My head snapped up, my eyes locking with Atticus's. These were not the sounds of a distant border skirmish. They were coming from inside the palace walls. A deep, guttural horn. One I had only read of in forbidden histories, the war horn of the Moonscar pack blasted through the air, a sound of pure doom. The trap was sprung. The blood drained from my face as the horrific truth crashed down on me. The skirmish was a lie. My guard was gone, and the enemy was already here. "What have you done?" I whispered, my voice trembling with a nascent, terrible rage. Atticus's placating demeanor fell away, replaced by a cold, triumphant sneer. "I have merely opened the door for a new era, Anya, one free from your family's outdated traditions." Anger, hot and pure, burned away my shock. I drew the twin daggers I always kept strapped to my thighs, their silver gleam a stark contrast to the sudden darkness in his eyes. "You sold my people to the savages at our border. For what? Power? A title under their beast alpha? I secured our future," he snarled, drawing his own sword. "Arthur is a true leader, a creature of power, not dusty spells and silver spires. He will unite these lands." We met in the center of the throne room, the clang of steel ringing in the sudden chaos. He was a politician, not a warrior. He fought with clumsy, desperate swings, while I moved with the deadly grace I'd been taught since birth. He parried one dagger, but left himself open. I didn't hesitate. The last thing I remembered was the satisfying jolt of my silver blade, sliding between the traitor's ribs, the stunned look of betrayal on his face as he stared down at the hilt buried in his chest. He collapsed onto the marble, a final stain on the honor he'd so completely destroyed. Chapter 2. The Alpha's Arrival. I stood panting over Atticus's body, his blood pooling around my boots, when the great doors to the throne room were thrown open with a deafening crash. A shadow fell over me, a presence of such overwhelming power that it felt like a physical blow. He filled the entire doorway, a silhouette against the fires now raging in the courtyard. Author, the alpha of the Moon Scar Pack. He was a beast of a man, taller and broader than any legend dared to claim, and he moved with a predator's unhurried grace. His eyes, the color of molten gold, swept the room, passing over the dead traitor to burn into me. There was no triumph in his gaze, only a chilling, possessive intensity. The sheer force of his presence, a suffocating wave of primal authority, buckled my knees even as I tried to stand tall. I raised my remaining dagger, my hand slick with Atticus's blood. He took one step, then another, his focus entirely on me. Before I could even react, he was on me. A sharp, brutal pain exploded above my temple. The throne room tilted, and the world dissolved into blackness. My last conscious thought was of defiance. As my strength failed and darkness claimed me, I cursed his name. Author. He had taken everything. He had used a trusted friend to gut my kingdom from the inside out. He had turned my home into a slaughterhouse. I felt strong hands lift me from the ground, my head lolling to the side. The scent of pine, wild musk, and a gathering storm filled my senses, a scent I knew would be burned into my memory forever. It was the scent of him. The beast, the alpha. Even as unconsciousness pulled me under, my spirit raged. I was Queen Anya. I was a warrior. This was not the end. This was not a surrender. It was a tactical retreat into darkness. I would endure. I would survive this humiliation, this capture. He may have my body, but he would never have my will. I would learn his weaknesses, and I would turn his own power against him. He thought he had won a kingdom, but he had only succeeded in creating the one enemy who would see his world burn to ash. I was adrift in a sea of nothingness, a void without thought or time. But through the haze, a single, powerful sensation broke through. The feeling of being held, of being carried, as if I weighed nothing at all. And then, a voice. A low rumble that seemed to vibrate through my very soul, cutting through the silence of my oblivion. It was quiet, almost a whisper, yet it held the absolute authority of a king. She is the one, the voice stated, not to anyone in particular, but as a declaration to the fates themselves. Her fire is exactly as the prophecy foretold. What do you think is going through the Alpha's mind? Is this just conquest, or is there something more personal at play? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you're hooked, show some love by hitting that like button and subscribing so you don't miss what happens next. Chapter 3. The Awakening and Defiance. The cold seeped into my bones before the darkness even registered. This wasn't the silken cool of my royal chambers. It was a damp, biting chill that clung to my skin like a shroud. A groan escaped my lips, the sound weak and foreign in the heavy silence. Where? My eyes snapped open. This wasn't my bed. Rough-hewn stone pressed against my back, and the air. It was thick with the scent of wet earth, stale blood, and him. The beast. The Alpha. The last thing I remembered was the satisfying jolt of my silver blade sliding between the traitor's ribs, the stunned look of betrayal on his face, and then, just a shadow falling over me. A presence of such overwhelming power. Now, I was his. My name is Anya, and I was a queen. My kingdom is one of sunlight and silver spires, a legacy of powerful matriarchs who ruled with a steady hand and a fierce heart. We weren't werewolves, not like the savages in the shadowed lands to the west, but we had our own strength, our own magic. Magic that clearly failed to protect me. My fingers twitched, searching for the daggers I kept strapped to my thighs, for the familiar leather of my battle tunic, but they only found thin, coarse fabric. A prisoner's shift that didn't do much to ward off the dungeon's chill. A quick, frantic check. I was alone. Chained, but alone. A thick iron cuff was locked around my left ankle. The chain bolted right into the stone floor. It gave me maybe 5 feet of movement. Enough to stand, to pace, to go completely mad. I pushed myself up, my muscles screaming in protest. My head throbbed, and a tender spot above my temple told me I'd been struck a coward's blow. Anger, hot and pure, shot through me, chasing away the fear for a moment. Lord Atticus. The traitor's face swam in my vision. He was my most trusted advisor, a man I'd known since I was a child, his silver tongue whispering lies in my ear for years. He had sold my kingdom, my people, and me to the monster at our borders. For what? Money? A title? My blade had found his heart. He'd bled out on the marble of my throne room. The attack had been a trap. Atticus's betrayal was the key that opened the gates. While my royal guard was busy with a skirmish he'd faked, the real threat had slipped right through. The alpha of the Moonscar Pack, Author. A name whispered in terrified stories around the fire, a beast of a man who ruled his feral wolves with an iron fist. He was the shadow that had fallen over me. His power was a physical thing, a suffocating wave of primal authority that had buckled my knees, even as I stood victorious over Atticus. I took a breath, then another, forcing the panic down. I was Queen Anya. I was a warrior. I've faced down armies and assassins. I would not be broken in a cage. I tugged at the chain, a pointless gesture, but my spirit demanded some act of resistance. It clanked loudly in the silence, an answer to my defiance. And then, I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, echoing down the stone corridor. They weren't the hurried steps of a jailer. They were the unhurried, confident steps of a king, of a predator. Chapter 4. The captor's arrival. The air grew thicker, heavy with that scent I'd woken to. Pine, wild musk, and something else. Something that smelled like a storm gathering on the horizon. It was the scent of raw, untamed power. The footsteps stopped right outside my cell. A key scraped in the heavy lock, and the iron-banded door groaned open. He filled the entire doorway, a silhouette against the torchlight in the hall. Author. He was even larger than the legends said, taller than any man I'd ever seen, with shoulders so broad they seemed to strain the leather of his tunic. As he stepped inside, the light caught the hard planes of his face, the sharp line of his jaw, and the chilling intensity of his eyes. They were the color of molten gold, and they burned into me with a possessive fire. This wasn't just some brute. This was a man who commanded power. "The little queen is awake," he said. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated right through the stone floor and up into my bones. It wasn't mocking, just a simple statement of fact, which was somehow even more insulting. "I will have your head for this, dog," I spat, my voice raspy, but laced with all the venom I had. "When my guard finds me—" "Your guard is scattered," he interrupted, taking another slow step into the cell. He moved with a predatory grace that was utterly terrifying. "Your castle is mine. Your throne is mine. And you," he stopped, looming over me, "are mine." That word hung in the air, a brand of ownership I refuse to accept. I belong to no one, especially not a savage who smells of dirt and blood. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a truly inhuman sound. His eyes flashed, the gold darkening to a fiery amber. For a second, I thought he would strike me. I braced for it, lifting my chin in defiance. But he didn't. Instead, a slow, cruel smirk touched his lips. "You have a fire, little queen. I'm going to enjoy putting it out." He crouched, bringing his face level with mine. The sheer force of his presence was a physical blow, making it hard to breathe. "You think this is about your throne? Your kingdom? Those are just prizes of war. You're something else entirely. You are the one I came for." His words made no sense. Why me? My kingdom was a strategic prize, a fertile land that his barren, rocky territory desperately needed. But his focus was entirely on me. It was personal, intense. "Atticus promised you my kingdom," I guessed, trying to piece it all together. "Did he also promise you me? Some trophy to hang in your squalid hall?" That smirk vanished from Arthur's face, replaced by a look of cold disgust. Atticus was a tool, a snivelling worm who thought he could bargain with a wolf. "He promised me access, and he paid for it with his life by your hand, I see. A pity. I would have enjoyed it more." His eyes flicked down to the rough shift I wore. "Your blade work is impressive. You carry the blood of my enemies." "It's a stain I wear with honor," I shot back. He just ignored me, his gaze analytical, searching. "You think you understand politics, Queen Anya. You play at courtly games and alliances. Out here, in the real world, there are older laws, deeper bonds." He reached out, and before I could flinch away, his rough fingers brushed a strand of hair from my face. His touch was like lightning, a jolt of unwanted energy that made my skin tingle. I recoiled as if I'd been burned. "Don't touch me," I hissed. His eyes gleamed with something that wasn't anger. It was interest. "Your kingdom has stood against mine for a century, a thorn in my family's side. Your great-grandmother killed my grandfather. Did your history books teach you that?" I just stared at him, stunned into silence. That was a forgotten piece of law, a border skirmish we barely remembered, a footnote. To him, it was everything. "This isn't just conquest," he continued, his voice dropping lower, more intimate. "This is retribution. This is the settling of a debt. And you, little queen, are how it will be settled." Chapter 5. The slow burn begins. He stood then, turning as if to leave. At the door he paused. "Your arm is bleeding." I glanced down. In all my anger and confusion, I hadn't even noticed the gash on my forearm, probably from when he'd struck me down. It was long and deep, oozing blood. "It's a scratch," I said dismissively. "It'll fester in this damp," he stated, his tone flat. He turned his head and gave a sharp bark, a command in a guttural language I didn't know. A moment later, a wary-looking man appeared, with a wooden bowl of water and a strip of clean linen. Arthur took them and came back into the cell, placing them on the floor just out of my reach. "Clean it," he ordered. I stared at the bowl, then back at him, my mind racing. I saw it for what it was, a test, an act of twisted kindness designed to unbalance me. He wanted to see if I would accept his help. "I would rather it rot off than accept anything from you." His jaw tightened. "You're no use to me, crippled. You are a queen. You will be broken, but you will not die of a common infection like some peasant. That's an indulgence I won't permit." He kicked the bowl an inch closer. "Clean it, or I'll have my guards hold you down and do it for you. And trust me, they won't be gentle." The threat was real, The humiliation of being held down by his brutish wolves would be a far greater wound to my pride. My hands clenched into fists. This wasn't submission. It was strategy. Survival. With stiff, jerky movements, I knelt, my eyes never leaving his. I dragged the bowl towards me and began to clean the wound. The water was cold and it stung, but I refused to make a sound. I worked in silence, intensely aware of his golden eyes watching my every move, his presence a suffocating weight in the tiny cell. He wasn't just my captor. He was studying my defiance, and I had the terrifying feeling he was learning all my secrets. Chapter 6. Rising Stakes. He left me in the dark. The bolt slammed shut, and I was alone again. I wrapped the linen tightly around my arm, my hands trembling now that his overwhelming presence was gone. I sank to the floor, my back against the cold stone, and finally let myself breathe. He planned to break me, not just my body but my will. He didn't want a dead queen, he wanted a kneeling one. And worse, he spoke of settling debts, of a connection between us that felt older and deeper than just war. The way he looked at me, it wasn't the triumphant gaze of a conqueror. It was something more primal, possessive. It was a raw, elemental energy that called to something deep inside me, something I refused to acknowledge. I hated him. I hated his arrogance, his brutality, his scent that still seemed to linger in the air. But underneath all that hate, a terrifying sliver of something else was taking root, an awareness. My body recognized him, even if my mind and my heart rebelled. It was an ancient, instinctual pull, the kind I'd only read about in forbidden lore. Was this it? The curse of a fated mate? To be destined for the one you despised more than anything? No, I would not allow it. I was Anya, Queen of Elindrael. I was the daughter of a line of unconquerable women. He could chain my body, but my spirit was my own. I would play his game. I'd eat his food, drink his water, and tend my wounds. I would survive. And with every single breath I took in his cursed dungeon, I would be planning my escape. I would find a way out, and I wouldn't just reclaim my throne. I would march on his shadowed lands with fire and silver, and I would burn his entire world to the ground. He wanted to break me. I would show him what it meant to be truly broken. I spent what felt like days in that darkness, marking time by the silent delivery of stale bread and water. My anger became a cold, hard stone in my gut. My grief for my kingdom became the whetstone I used to sharpen my resolve. On the third cycle of darkness, the door opened again. It was him. He said nothing, just stood there in the doorway, his golden eyes pinning me to the spot. The air crackled with tension. I rose to my feet, my chain rattling ready for the next assault. He took a step inside, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical touch. I steeled myself for a threat, an order, another turn of the screw. But what he said shattered my defenses completely. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it filled the entire cell. I have waited 100 years for a queen with your fire to be born. He took another step closer, his scent enveloping me. You smell of prophecy, Anya. You smell of my destiny. And that's where we have to leave our queen for tonight. Trapped, defiant, and now faced with a destiny she never ever wanted. If you're dying to know what happens next, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. We're building our pack here, and you don't want to be left out in the cold. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next chapter.